Good morning, Janice.
Good morning, Anthony.
Today we'll describe why a letter of instruction for Bitcoin inheritance will fail. So a letter of instruction, I know I hate to be a downer, but a letter of instruction will most likely fail for your Bitcoin inheritance plan. And if any, you should have it only as a very marginal role in your plan. If you do a Google search or any kind of search about Bitcoin inheritance, you'll probably see a lot of advice or a lot of suggestions that you include, if not completely rely on, a letter of instruction to your heirs. And we even are sort of guilty of this, and we talked about it in episode 218, and even provided a template letter of instruction. But today we're having spent, I think, a lot more time delving into the pros and cons and the different avenues for Bitcoin inheritance. We're sort of, I wouldn't say changing our tune, but want to strongly de-emphasize that letter of instruction.
Yes, we have talked about this so much. This whole Bitcoin is evolving, right, as we go along, and that was about 100 episodes ago. So we're learning.
Very good. All right, so a letter of instruction sort of is a subcategory of another type of advice that's called educating your heirs. So again, a lot of folks are out there are saying, oh, you know what you need to do to make Bitcoin inheritance work. By the way, we're talking about self-custodied Bitcoin if it's with a third party, which is most Bitcoiners sort of understand the reason you get into Bitcoin is to avoid trusted third parties. But so we're definitely discussing Bitcoin inheritance of self-custodied Bitcoin. So, which is fairly complicated. And that's why a lot of folks think, oh, I'll just make sure to educate my heirs. I'll make sure my spouse or my son or whoever will, by the time I pass away, I'll make sure he knows how to do self-custody just as well as I do.
Ah, yes.
You see any flaws in that plan yet?
None at all. And that is sarcasm.
Like any other educational endeavor, you need an eager and willing student. Otherwise, it just won't stick.
Right.
I mean, if you can pound home all your self-custody knowledge onto your spouse, child, or other relative or friend, but unless that heir is self-motivated to learn on their own, I mean, they might temporarily understand and show you that aha moment of clarity. So that you're like, oh, okay, cool, he gets it. I feel confident that all I have to do is a fairly simple letter of instruction, and they'll put it all together upon my passing.
Yes. Yeah.
But if they don't really care that much about self-custody, if they're not as gusto as you are, all that knowledge, all that temporary clarity that you shared with them is just going to leak out of their heads almost immediately.
It went right out the window because they might have been even appeasing just to say, yes, I understand. Please stop teaching me, right? Because it is a lot if you're not interested or you just don't have the capacity to take that on.
Just remember when you first started in your Bitcoin journey, and if you weren't interested and somebody started mouthing at you about self-custody and hardware wallets, your eyes would just glaze over.
Absolutely, yeah. Because they're big words, big concepts. And like we've talked about, it changes all the time.
And in case you're wondering, Bitcoin's different. We see this all the time with other legacy assets, art, collectibles, and in particular small businesses. You have, I'll just say the father figure who spent a lifetime building this really profitable and really excellent small business, family-owned small business that he wants to make sure to pass on to the heirs. The heirs are just not interested. They don't want to run the family store or factory or whatever. Correct. So no matter how much the father figure tries to teach them how to run the business, they just don't care enough to learn it.
Don't want to. Right, right.
So that's the sort of, I won't call it resistance, but lack of interest you're dealing with. And you don't want to rely on that, educating your heirs to make sure that this self-custody Bitcoin transfers properly. Because as we've talked about in the past, self-custody Bitcoin that doesn't have a transfer of custody upon your passing is basically lost Bitcoin.
Yes, gone, like all your hard work.
All right, so let's say you're not relying on educating your heirs, but rather you are Shakespeare. You are the Shakespeare of letters of instruction, and you expect to write a letter that is so good and so well thought out that upon your passing, anyone who reads this letter, even someone who has zero knowledge of Bitcoin, will immediately understand how to successfully gain custody.
I'm thinking that person should probably write books because
I mean, even books. I mean, okay, look.
I mean, yeah.
We've seen it before. We actually talked about it before. Even with legacy assets that are more understandable by your heirs, theoretically more understandable, letters of instructions don't really help.
No.
And why? Okay, number one, people in general, human beings, we tend to overestimate our ability to keep things up to date and to stay on top of things. But things change over time. Your situation changes over time. Your assets change over time. A lot of different things. And the notion that, oh yeah, don't worry, every year or even every couple of months, I will keep this letter. I will write a new version of this letter to keep it up to date. People don't do that.
You forget. That's, you did it, you put it away, you don't think about it. That's a lot to think about every 5 months to write a new letter.
Yeah. On the flip side, from your heir side, most heirs and most humans, we're terrible at reading, comprehending, and following instructions. I mean, think of every piece of IKEA furniture, every TV, trying to set up a cable box, every phone. We're so bad at it.
We are. And if it's not like we aren't being held our hand, we're not going to get it. Yeah.
And then try to imagine that. I mean, not IKEA, but you understand what I'm saying? Like something complicated.
I do. Yeah.
Right after your spouse or brother or cousin or somebody has passed away and you're going through a lot of stuff emotionally and even bureaucratically if you are dealing with probate. And now on top of that, here's a technology you have zero familiarity with, and if you don't do this right, you're going to lose everything or get hacked. Come on.
No pressure, but I can't imagine these letters would be short because it's a lot of information. So you have to now take in pages and pages, and it's a lot.
But I wrote you a letter, so it'll be fine.
Yes.
Based on what we've seen, having done hundreds, if not thousands, of probates, it just doesn't seem realistic.
No, it doesn't.
And that's because we've seen heirs struggle with even basic assets where the heirs should be and are super familiar with them, with bank accounts, brokerage accounts, stock certificates. Yeah.
Oh, stock certificates. That's even harder.
And it's not
CDs,
because it's not because heirs are dumb or can't follow instructions.
No.
It's the circumstances. It's a lot for any heir to handle in that scenario.
Yes.
And so obviously something completely foreign like Bitcoin, self-custodied Bitcoin would be a huge hurdle for a non-Bitcoiner to deal with.
Absolutely. 100%.
Especially relying only on a letter of instruction.
On a letter that may or may not be written wonderfully.
And may not be up to date.
It may not be up to date. It seems like there's just so many variables, and so it could be so many flaws.
Again, you can have a letter of instruction, but
sure,
it should not be a featured piece of your estate plan or
it shouldn't be the backbone at all.
So then lastly, a letter of instruction is too often a version of a Bitcoin inheritance treasure hunt.
Oh, yeah.
So it's too often a treasure map to various seed phrase shards or a hidden backup clone hardware wallet. And this is just a terrible idea. It's even more complicated. This is just basically a worse and more complicated version of a letter of instruction, but you're adding a hunt or a search based on
a treasure hunt. Walk 3 steps, turn right, go left, upside down.
Now, if you were wondering, no, I'll do a good job, or why is this a bad idea? Because again, based on our experience, having done hundreds, if not thousands of probates, we've seen these types of treasure maps or letters of instruction fail for even the simplest things like keys or where the will is located, or because they don't keep them up to date, or things get moved and then it's pointless.
They moved them. They moved the safe. They moved the piece of paper, but didn't update the treasure map. We've seen it lead to dead ends more times than not.
Yep.
Yeah.
So again, we highly discourage you from relying on a treasure map, actually for any part of your Bitcoin inheritance plan, just because of the risks we're kind of trying to hammer home now.
Yes.
So that's it. I know it doesn't seem a bit counter. I see a lot of, forum posts and websites that say, oh, you start with a letter of instruction. Okay, that's fine. But again, it should not be, the plan should not hinge or rely on a letter of instruction. But rather, it can be something to help. And we'll talk later about what should be the features of your Bitcoin inheritance plan. But that's where we are with this now.
Absolutely. So I always suggest Anthony's book, How Probate Works, available on Amazon. And this does apply to all of this Bitcoin because, first of all, you need to know the steps of what's going to happen after, and then you're going to be further complicating it with the Bitcoin.
Yep. Very good. So again, letter of instruction probably won't work. So don't have it be a linchpin of your plan. And we will talk soon about the plan that we do recommend. Thanks, Janice, as always. And thank you, everyone, for listening and for all your questions. Take care.
Yes, thank you.